one to undergo decay. Who would have predicted the rise, the fall of kingdoms like Assyria, Egypt, Babylon, Tyre, Sidon, the subjugation of the Medes and Persians to the Greeks, the rise of Rome? And see, we have copies of the Bible that date 200 years. The copies date 200 years before Christ. It's not like we don't know that these books are old. And yet they're always accurate. Who could have predicted the tiny details, like the casting of lots for Jesus' garments, found in Psalm 22, verse 18? Or the piercing of his hands and feet in Psalm 22, verse 16. But then they weren't going to break any of his bones in Psalm 34, verse 20. Those books was around for 1,000 years before Jesus. And you have all these little details. That's why we need to understand what God said in Isaiah 41. Isaiah 41 and in verse 21. Oops. I'm writing on the wrong. Hold on. Now I lost the passage. I wrote down Isaiah 41:21, but that's Isaiah 41 doesn't go up to 21. Oh, I hate when I do that. The one about calling the bird of prey. And now I can't find it. It's right at the end of the chapter. Whichever chapter it was. Oh, wait a minute. Here we go. Would help if I'm in Isaiah. I was in Jeremiah. No wonder I couldn't find it. Isaiah 41. Yeah, there we go. 21. Sorry. I was in Jeremiah. I couldn't find it. Isaiah 41 verse 21. Present your case as the Lord. Bring forward your strong arguments. The King of Jacob says, let them bring forth and declare to us what's going to take place. And as for the former events, declare what they were, that we may consider them and know their outcome, or announce to us what is coming, declaring the things that are going to come afterwards, that we may know that you are gods. Indeed, do good or evil, that we may be anxiously look about us and fear together. Behold, you are on no account, and your works amount to nothing. He who chooses you is an abomination. God basically puts out a challenge. Tell us what used to happen accurately. Tell us what's going to happen accurately. Hold us to a standard of good or evil, so we might look about us in dismay. People don't do that. There's dozens of books that attempt to tell the future. We have books about coming utopias that never happened. We can't even predict accurately what will happen in the next decade, let alone detailed events for 500 years in advance. Yet the Bible is filled with direct prophecies, subtle use of foreshadowing, of seemingly obscure references which all play together as the story unfolds. And a people whose own book degrades them, kept them, preserves them for the future. Just for a moment, just think of what other books like that? We got a whole religious group called the Muslims, following a religion called Islam. They have a book called the Quran. It's a book containing the sayings of Muhammad. Muhammad didn't write it, by the way. It was written after his death because Muhammad was illiterate. And in that book he swings from respect for the Jews and the Christians, whom he calls the people of the book, to disdain when he realizes that they won't accept him as a prophet. It doesn't prove itself by any divine prophecies. There are no accurate prophecies in the Quran about what the future will be like. It calls the Bible holy and divine, but it's inconsistent with what the Bible teaches. It has internal contradictions, even though it's basically the work of one man. I got a list downstairs of where it just says the opposite things. It gives, for instance, rules like men can only have up to 4 wives. Except for Muhammad, he gets to 15. That's what you expect from a man, right? Everybody else has rules, and the man who's writing the rules gets the exception, right? It spreads evil, fear, murder, subjugation. That's a book you expect men to write. But it's not like the Bible. Or what about the Book of Mormon? It leans heavily on the King James Version of the Bible. Which really, as you think about it, it's kind of odd. Since it claims to be a collection of sacred writings from 2,000 years earlier, but was discovered in the 1800s. Because after all, the King James Version was written in the 1600s. So why is it quoted so heavily from the King James Version? And where are the predictive elements? In fact, Joseph Smith did try some predictions. He got them mostly wrong. Even the ones where it was just going to take place next year, he sometimes got it wrong. And there's no long-distance predictions. There's no long-term predictions of, what's going to happen 100 years from now. This is a book that could come from human wisdom. Its author, Joseph Smith, was heavily influenced by Freemasonry, popular beliefs of his time. For example, there was an essay on the origins of the Indians, and it's basically the popular belief of the time in the 1800s, which has since been disproved. There's no element of divine wisdom. There's no accurate foreknowledge. It's a book you expect from the hand of man. Only the Bible has a single theme pointing from the coming of a Messiah in the Old Testament to the looking backwards as the Messiah had arrived in the New Testament. Only the Bible shows accurate predictive features. Only the Bible calls people to a standard that's higher than they can attain. Telling people they have to improve themselves. And it calls itself complete. In Jude verse 3, it says, "Beloved, while I was making every effort to write to you about our common salvation, I felt the necessity to write to you, appealing that you contend earnestly for the faith which was once for all delivered to the saints." One time delivered. And in 2 Peter chapter 1, and in verse 3, seeing that His divine power has granted to us everything pertaining to life and godliness through the true knowledge of Him who called us by His own glory and excellence. It is a sure foundation. It is what God has given. In Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 19. Ephesians chapter 2 and in verse 19. "So then you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are fellow citizens with the saints and are of God's household, having been built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ Himself being the chief cornerstone, in which the whole building being fitted together, growing into a holy temple in the Lord, in which you are being built together into a dwelling of God in the Spirit." This is the Bible that we have, the Creator's own book. It's not like any other book in the world. It's different. It's not like what men write. And even if men were inclined to try writing a book, it's not the way they would write it. That's why we believe that the Bible is God's Word. Just one small reason. I hope you'll think about this today. Offer an opportunity. If there's anyone here today who is not a child of God, there's no better time than right now to put on Christ. If you are a child of God, would like to praise your brethren on your behalf, why don't you come forward as we stand and sing the song that's selected.